All righty. Hello, everyone. This is Jono Bacon from the orbiting Bacon space station. I hope you're all safe and well. Thank you for joining me for my session. I managed to catch a little bit of Chad's session previously, but I was stuck in a call, but it sounded amazing. Hopefully there's recordings of all this stuff because there's so much great content. But thank you, everybody, for coming and joining me today. So I'm going to talk today about how do we use your community to help shape your products in a really interesting and dynamic way. Okay. Now, some of you I've not met before. In fact, I'm going to click on the chat so I can see what you're doing. Feel free to get questions and stuff into the chat channel. I always love these to be as interactive as possible. Okay. But as a little bit of background, I used to lead community for GitHub, XPRIZE, and Canonical. I'm a consultant. I work with a pretty broad range of companies around how you go passionate, productive, engaging communities. Okay. So today I want to talk about products. You know, your product is going to vary depending on what you're working on. It might be a software service. It may be a book. It may be an activism campaign. It may be something else, right? But you've got something that you're focused on. That's usually what tends to bring a lot of communities together. The big question is, how do we make that product better? And there's a billion different screws you can turn with a screwdriver to make it better. So which ones do you turn? So the key thing I want to touch on in this session is that the answers to all of your questions live in your audience's head. I don't care whether you're a musician and you're making music, whether you're a community leader and you're running a community, whether you are a product manager, all of those answers live in your audience's head. So what we want to do is we want to get those answers out via our community and improve our product in interesting ways. Okay. Now, typically the way a lot of people will do this is through a survey. And you'll kind of reach out and say, hey, what do you want to see? What is interesting to you? And that's great. And surveys are fine in some ways. But the problem with surveys is that people aren't thinking entirely, I don't know the right way of describing it, but basically in surveys, people are moderating themselves in some ways. You never get completely accurate information out of surveys, but I think they are useful. What's more useful, I think, is how you go about processing the information in that survey in creative ways. And what this is all about is something called product market fit. Now, some of you may be not familiar with this. If you're unfamiliar with this, the basic notion is you want to make sure that your product meets a certain market, right? So let's say you're creating a CRM and it's designed for small businesses, right? You want to make sure that that CRM is, all the features are going to be relevant and interesting to your audience. The big problem a lot of companies face is that they go down this avenue of trying to be all things to all people. They create loads of products and then you get toolbars packed with icons that nobody uses, right? So what we want to do is we want to figure out the best way of understanding what our target audience wants, and then we inform our product market fit based upon that. And this is where the community kind of fits into it. Now, there's a bit of backstory here, and I'm stealing some really great ideas, okay? I've got a podcast called Conversations with Bacon, where I basically bring people on to come and talk about, you know, just people who I think are doing really interesting things. And I had this guy on called Rahul Vohra, and he is the CEO of a company called Superhuman. I met at a conference. Superhuman basically create an email client. It's kind of like Gmail, but it's really stripped down in terms of there's nowhere near as much clutter, and it's super fast, and it's designed for email power users. I don't particularly like that term, but basically people who live in their inboxes, right? It's $30 a month, and not a lot of people are going to be willing to pay $30 a month. I'm a user of it, and I would pay twice that. I absolutely love Superhuman. Now, what's interesting, I'm not trying to sell you on Superhuman, I promise you, is that, so Superhuman, hang on, I'm pressing all the wrong buttons, 1 second. Superhuman basically looks a little bit like this, okay? Now, what's interesting to me is less what the application is. It's more about their approach to product market fit. And Rahul wrote a piece on this, and this is what I'm going to be baking into our community approach, okay? So what we've got here is they did a survey, and they basically asked people, how would you feel if you could no longer use Superhuman? Okay, they basically reached out and asked people this, and they got a proportion of people that will be not disappointed, as in whatever, don't care, you know, whatever. There'd be people who would be very disappointed because they love it. I would put myself in that category, and there'd be some people who would be kind of annoyed if it went away. Now, what they did is they took the very disappointed people, right? So the people who are the super fans, and they basically figured out what kind of personas they fill into. Okay, so they basically came up with these. Okay, founder, manager, executive, and business development. Now, this is data driven. Like, people could put anything in there. You could put, you know, probably artist and, I don't know, musician and whatever else in there. But these were the 4 categories of people. And if you've got enough data, this gives you a good sense of the general personas. And one of the challenges that we face in communities is who are our audiences that we're targeting? So what they did is they did that. And they basically evaluated, one of the questions in the survey was, what are the things you're most excited about? Or one of the things you love in the product? And they put this through like a word cloud. And they came up with people love the speed, people love the keyboard shortcuts, people love the fact that it's fast, all of these different pieces. So what they did is they found that speed was a critical component of this. And I would put myself in this category. It's super fast, like it's blazing fast. Now what they did is they basically decided that they were going to, and this is from the article that he wrote about this, they were going to politely disregard those who would not be disappointed. Okay. So the people who would not be disappointed, essentially in Rahul's view, they're so far from loving you that you might as well just kind of consider them a bit of a lost cause. So what they did is they took people who loved the speed component, right, and evaluated it based upon people who were somewhat disappointed. So these are the people who are kind of on the fence, like, oh, I'm kind of finding some value in this. I'm kind of not finding some value in this. And then they found they asked them in the survey, and they pulled this through the analysis, what are the things that you really want? What are the things that are missing? Okay. Pratika asks, what is this article called? I can't remember, I'm being honest with you. I have the memory of a sieve. If you do a search on Google for superhuman product market fit, you'll be able to find it. And it's on I think it's on a VC's website that annoyingly asks for your email address about 6 times in a row. We'll put that to one side, minor rant. So anyway, so what they did is when they looked at these people, so let me just recap. Okay. Oh, thank you, P. Barat, for posting it in the chat. Just let me go back. This gave the Superhuman team an idea of what their most valued customers love, right? So this gave them a sense of what should they be talking about and marketing about, right? What does their interaction on the internet, what does their social media look like? Now, when we go back and they evaluated the somewhat disappointed people, what they were missing, they found this. They wanted a mobile app. They wanted integration. They wanted better search. They wanted attachments. That gave them the target set of things that they needed to focus on, because they knew that if they could hit these target features, it would be able to bring them into their product as, much more passionate customers. Okay. So the summary of this, the reason why I'm laying this groundwork is that engagement is critical, right? Again, I'm going to go back to all of the answers live in the heads of our audiences. Okay. All of you who are watching this are passionate about communities. Therefore, you're amazing people. Some of you will have communities of a small number of people. Some of you will have communities in the millions. And those communities are packed with insight. And the reason why this is because communities are this amazing network of minds, this amazing network of insight, of talent, of time. And that's, I think, where we want to tap into it. So what I'm going to go through here is, now we've gone through that foundation of the product market fit piece, I'm going to talk through about how we wire that into a community, and then some just general best practices that I've learned over the years. Now, I'm going to talk about some things that remind you book people powered. This is not a sales pitch. In fact, towards the end of this, I'm actually going to give you a link where you can go and download a couple of free chapters of this and some templates and some other stuff. So stay tuned for that. But everything I'm going to walk through here is covered in people powered. So if this is kind of interesting to me, you might want to check it out. Now, one of the things I often talk about is this thing called the community participation framework. I kind of designed this over the course of my career. And the basic gist of it is that I believe that the best experiences in the world are journeys, right? If you go to Disney, am I back now? I think someone sat on the wrong remote control. You know what, Mac? I'm going to throw you under the bus for this one. Mac sat on the remote control, was leaning back to grab some Cheetos and sat on the wrong remote control. Anyway, whatever. I'm just joking. Mac is amazing, as is Jacob, as is the Hopin team. Anyway, so I don't know where I fell off, so I'm going to go from here. So, as I mentioned earlier on, I think the best experiences are journeys, right? And a carefully curated community journey is really, really important. Okay. So one of the hardest elements of how we figure out what to do in a community is understanding who our target audience should be. If we can't understand that audience, who that audience is, and we can't carve out value for them, then we make a community that's boring. Okay. So all of our communities have got to be super interesting to people. So the good news is that through the product market fit piece, we can identify these target audiences. One of the things I've learned in my career is depending on your audience, they have very, very different attitudes and norms in terms of community. So for example, if I'm building a community of executives, they are probably not going to go to forums, right? They're probably going to go and primarily react to people and collaborate via email and Zoom calls and things like that. Engineers, though, are very happy in mailing lists and Slack and forums and things like that. So this gives us already tremendous insight into who we design our communities for. Now what we do is we build the onboarding experience, right? And this is, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because I've talked about this previously, and some of you may have seen this in my previous sessions. But essentially, if you want to generate value, which is the star, so when somebody comes into your community, you want to consume value as simply and as easily as possible, right? It could be content, it could be joining an event. I mean, a good example is the Community Chat Summit, right? There's tons of amazing content, amazing speakers throughout the next couple of days. This is, tons of value. And that's why many of you are here. You didn't come here because you just love ComSor, right? You came here because the content pulled you in. Now, you want to make sure that onboarding is crisp and as easy as possible, right? So that's how we get people to that value. Now what happens is when people join a community, they go through these 3 phases. They start out as casual members. They don't really know anyone. There's a ton of imposter syndrome. And then what happens is as they participate more, usually for about 2 months, they build a habit. So if you want to change anything, if you want to change any kind of element of your life, in many cases, not all cases, it takes about 2 months to develop a habit. You want to lose weight, you want to stop boozing as much, you want to exercise more often. If you stick at it for 2 months, it becomes a lot easier because you essentially rewire elements of your brain and the expectation around doing that activity. So we want that for our community members. We want them to be coming in and hanging out for 2 months, then they become regulars. And then a small number of people become your super fans. They're super enthusiastic about what you're doing, okay? So this is the general approach. And then what we can do is we can use incentives to move them forward. Again, I'm kind of skimming through this because I've talked about this previously and all of this is in People Powered, and I've got other presentations you go and check out if you want to learn about this in more detail. The reason why I'm talking about this is that if we develop this journey, first of all, we create a much better, more predictable community experience. But what we also do is we're able to segment our audience into these 3 sections: casual, regulars, and core. So with casual, you focus on mentoring and support and value. Regulars, you encourage collaboration and people getting to know each other and coming up with interesting ideas. And core is all about tapping into the wisdom about how you make the whole community better. What's exciting about this is that because you segment it this way, the regulars and the core people are perfect candidates for providing product feedback. These are the people you want to reach out to and incorporate in, not just how your community is operating. If you encourage anyone to provide feedback and how to improve your community, that's great. They feel like this is a malleable environment that they love to be in. But if you also ask for that feedback in terms of a product, that's amazing. Put yourself in this position, right? I want to pick something that I'm a big fan of, okay? Let's say this. Bought this recently, okay? Stream Deck. It's a thing for, I'm not a gamer. It's a thing for switching video feeds in live streams. Imagine I come and join the Elgato community, right? And I participate. I get a lot of value out of it. I learn how to use this. I learn how to use other things better. I become a casual member. I'm starting to get to know members of the community. We're having a good time. This is great. Then I become a regular because I've been hanging out for a couple of months. I've been answering other people's questions. People are answering my questions. Now imagine someone from Elgato reaches out to me personally and says, hey, we're thinking about doing a new version of the Stream Deck. What do you think? What do you think we should go into it? We'd love to hop on a call. We'd love to understand what you're interested in. We'd love to maybe have you try a beta feature that we've got in our new software. That kind of stuff is really, really exciting, okay? It delivers an amazing level of connection between the organization and the community. And not all communities do this by any stretch. So I think this is super powerful, but we need that product market fit analysis first to be able to evaluate that. Now, I want to kind of go through 5 things that I've learned as I've kind of worked on this over the years that may be relevant to this as well. I think the first thing is that when you identify your regulars and your core, you really want to use consistent opportunities for input. I am firmly of the view, and maybe this is because I'm a total control freak, that we want to be in control of our surroundings. I don't think people like to be forced into a cube, into a box, and go through a to-do list. I just don't think most human beings are naturally wired up that way. Look at your desk. You set up your desk in the way that you want it. I've got weird thing. I've got this weird thing on my desk. I don't know where this came from. Oh, this was from an event I spoke at in Sweden, I think it was. But my desk looks like my desk, right? My office looks like my office. There's my kids' artwork over there. That thing in the background is from a metal show in Vancouver. it's my office. I get to make my environment what I like. And it's the same thing with community members. If they feel like they can shape your community, they can tune it, they can refine it, they can feed into what it looks like in the future, that's amazing. That makes it a place where you want to be, where it builds belonging. It's the same thing with products and services. The products that I love the most, I have an open relationship with the people who make them. They ask and they provide opportunities for feedback. I think this is critically important. The other element I think is rewarding that valuable feedback when it happens. Sorry, 1 second. Tea break. I'm English. This is my energy drink. So, for example, when I work with communities and people hit a certain level in the community, I like to do intrinsic rewards, like recognizing them in the community, like you can see on the left here with when I was working with Intel, opensource.com. They celebrate people who create content for their website in the community. If they send them swag and recognition, Matamos.com are a good example. When people hit certain milestones, I think it's like a first contribution to the project, they'll send them a mug that's branded. Like these are all great ways for people to, Helio says UK represent, all great ways for people to be recognized for the great participation and the great feedback they provide, including criticism. My view is very simple, is that constructive criticism is incredibly valuable. I think it's even more valuable than the validation, right? And then all the things where you're on the right track. I don't want to know what I'm doing great all the time. I want to know how I can improve, how I can get better, how I can be stronger, how I can be more efficient, how I can be more amenable and deliver value to people. So this doesn't have to be sending tons of swag out to people. This can be, again, a thank you. It can be, there's all kinds of intrinsic rewards. You can give people an email address that goes straight to your executive team. You can celebrate them on a blog. You can, introduce them to people they want to get to know. You can write an endorsement for them on LinkedIn. There's all kinds of ways in which you can do this digitally. The key thing is we open up the door for participation in the community as well as the product, and we reward it. The third thing I want to touch on here is around idea trackers. Now, this is something a lot of people, wow, there's a lot of UK people here. Rosie from Brighton. Brighton is beautiful, by the way. Daniel is saying that I should have a biscuit to dip in there in this tea, which I should. Although, to be honest with you, our dog is called Biscuit, and he won't fit in my cup, and that would be disgusting. So we're getting into a tea making discussion here. I'm going to move on. So the thing is, I think we need to set expectations when it comes to idea trackers. And what I mean by this is a lot of organizations will say, hey, why don't we do this? We've got a community. Why don't we set up a place where people can post their ideas and then they can upvote them and downvote them, a little bit like Reddit, and then we'll get a sense of the most popular ideas. Now, this sounds great in theory, but what it does is it imposes a social contract. So many years ago when I was at Canonical, we did something called Ubuntu Brainstorm. We set it up. We had, I think, nearly 1 million votes. We had like thousands and thousands of ideas submitted. And one of the top voted one was fix power management. Now, I'm not going to delve too deep into the nerdery because it's kind of irrelevant, but you can't just fix power management in all laptops, especially when you are not the people who make the laptops. It varies from machine to machine. So even though that was of great relevance and interest to our community because they wanted better battery life, there was no way we could ever completely fix that problem. So what happened is it stayed at the top of the list forever, and our community got increasingly pissed off because of that, because we're like, well, why aren't you going and fixing it? The expectation was, these are the things we've told you. Why aren't your engineers going and fixing this? And that's frankly, a reasonable position for the community to make. We hadn't set the expectations. So if you use these idea trackers, I think you want to be very, very careful in how you set those expectations in your community about how you use that information. The fourth thing I would like to recommend you think about as well is the visibility on your roadmap. Now, road mapping varies massively between different companies, okay? This is an example of a company called ConvertKit, and they post, frankly, not a lot of information, but they basically say, these are the things we're working on. And they've got a forum where you can go and dump your ideas into the forum, but it doesn't really work very well. It's just like kind of yelling into a tunnel. You don't get staff members responding and things like that as much. But they do provide a little bit of visibility on what's coming. And I think community members love this, because if you're in a product community, like, for example, I'm in a community called the Fractal Audio Systems community, which is all about this device called the Axe Effects, which musicians use to simulate guitar amps. They post like what's new in the next firmware releases there all the time. And I go there pretty much every day to see what's new in that firmware because I'm excited to see what my thing that I've already bought can do. So having visibility on the roadmap is super valuable. I think the key thing is that when you do this, is you list in there the community members that were involved in providing you with the feedback that fed into the process. That's super powerful. And then the fifth one here, and the final one, is really about integrating with product workflow. Now, again, this is a much longer conversation because this is kind of get into product teams and all those different pieces. But what we're talking about here throughout this presentation is kind of the ideation and the concept and viability of an idea, of a feature improvement, of something along those lines. And I think what we want to do is you could run an amazing community initiative in gathering this and following through the things that I've mentioned here and trying things out and improving on my ideas. And you may come up with a perfect list of things that you know your audience will love. But if you don't build that into the product development piece, then it will just be ignored. So this means building super close relationships with product teams and with engineering teams. And the best way to do that is to experiment and say, let's just do this for one feature. Let's experiment. And then let's see what they say, and then we'll run it through the process, and then we'll test it and see if the feature resonated with our audience. Because it's always better to start small. I think too many community professionals are so excited about building communities that then they're like, you know what, I'm really excited about this, but you know, why isn't the whole company focused on the value of the community? Like, these are the most valuable people that we've got. So they come up with these massive visions, and what they don't do is they don't start small and then just build trust and momentum. Because frankly, for most of the people who are not in this session right now, who are not in the Community Chat Summit 2020, the word community can mean anything from a knitting circle to a giant technology project. It's just really bloody confusing to most people. And a lot of product and engineering teams share that kind of confusion. So I wanted to make sure we got some time for questions. I just want to talk about something very briefly. So I got this book out. It's called People Powered. I'm really thrilled with it. It's got 5 stars on Amazon. It's actually, this slide's a little bit old. It's just under 5 stars on Goodreads because more and more people are reading it. It's a bestseller on Amazon and Porchlight, and it recently won one of the Business Book Awards. And I wanted to I want to make sure that you folks can leave with something that might be interesting. So if you go to jonobacon.com/pack, you can get 2 chapters of the book. I'm going to send it to you via PDF. I'm also going to send you the audiobook chapters and then a whole bunch of templates that might be useful in going about building out communities. And then I'm also going to follow up with like just video content. And what I don't do is I don't spam people with like, go and buy this, go and buy that. I try not to do that. So I try to follow up with just a ton of really valuable input and guidance. So be sure to check that out. The one thing I was going to add in here as well that may be relevant, and again, I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch, is I'm actually launching a training course on Monday about how to get your dream community job. It's going to have like 6 hours worth of content, 25 different lessons, loads of worksheets. And there's a pre-order price that's going to end in the next couple of days. So if you go to training.jonobacon.com, you can go and find out about that. But I just wanted to drop that in briefly. But more importantly, Helio says, is it available on Audible? Yes. Yeah, you can get People Powered in Kindle, hardback, and Audible. And I read the Audible one myself. My velvety English baritone. Anyway, please get some questions in because I'd love to answer anything in here that might be interesting or relevant or maybe not relevant. Let me turn off hang on, how do I do this? Daniel says, awesome session, John. I really appreciate it. What do you thank you. What do you think is a good size for a community to shape your product? If, for example, your ultimate potential target market is 1 million people. So I think you do need a certain amount of data to make this, like the product market fit piece, which, that piece work. I think you really I don't think we need to go into excessive levels. I kind of go back to Dan Ariely, who's a professor at MIT, his views on this. And he basically says, you need a relatively small sample size. I think if you have 50 or 100 people filling in your survey, that can be useful. The more data you've got, the better, I would say. Helio says, congratulations, you made £19 on Audible. Thank you. What a rock star. Melissa, I arrived late. Can anyone share their notes or fill me in on the points before set expectations? You know what, Melissa, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record this and put it on YouTube so you'll be able to check it out. Carolina, Carolina, as a new community consultant, what's a good way to start sourcing clients and leads? How do you ease clients into understanding your work? What a great question. And it's not easy. Now, I had this somewhat of a bit of a benefit because I'd written a book called The Art of Community, and I've been working in community for a while. So I don't tend to do a lot of sourcing of clients. I'm very fortunate in the fact that people introduce people to me, or people come to me through my website or whatever. I think the key thing, Carolina, that I would recommend is pick a niche, pick something that you're especially passionate about. So for example, it could be events, or it could be building communities around underrepresented groups, or it could be building Facebook groups. It could be something along those lines. I think specialty is one of the most important things. When I started out, I was like, I'll do anything you want. And then I realized that's not great. Thank you for the kind words, everyone. You're all lovely people. And I want to make sure that I get out of here on time. Let me just check that Mac, I don't want to be annoying Mac, particularly as I criticize Mac for his Cheeto habit. Mac's got a real problem with Cheetos, by the way, just so you know. I'm completely making this up. All right. I'm going to cover maybe one more question because I think I need to get out and give time for the next session to start. How to expand your core community effectively, from Malvika. So I think the key thing with core people is when they come into, just as a tiny recap, casual, regular, core, your core people are super fans. You want to bring them in almost as if they're a member of your community team. You know, weekly calls with them. You want to give them the white glove treatment. Ask them bluntly, like, how do we need to improve? How can we get better at what we're doing? And the more visibility you provide to your core people, the more it will encourage your regular people to participate, because they want that social recognition too. And then, so the more you showcase your core folks, it will encourage people to join. Now, what's critical is when you showcase your core people, you don't do it in this really exclusionary way. Don't make them out to be, you know, the royals. What you want to do is you want to say, you know, these people have been really helping our community for many years, and then encourage them into your regulars to keep participating, and then eventually they'll get into the core as well. All right, I'm going to get out of here because I want to make sure that the next session can start. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, and you know, take care of yourselves. We're in this period of real challenge right now. And remember, we're all human beings. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. We're all human beings, and we should treat each other equitably and fairly. All right, goodbye, everyone.